Hi guys, welcome to my channel. Before we get started, make sure to hit that like button. Also subscribe to my channel. Influenza flu history. So make sure to watch the full video. Introduction. Influenza, commonly known as the flu, is a highly contagious respiratory illness caused by influenza viruses. It has a long and complex history, with periodic outbreaks and pandemics that have affected millions of people worldwide. In this blog, we will provide a brief introduction to the history of influenza, tracing its origins and major milestones in our understanding and management of this infectious disease. The origins of influenza can be traced back to ancient times, although the exact timeline and origins remain uncertain. Historical records and writings mention outbreaks of respiratory illnesses with symptoms similar to the flu, but it wasn't until the 20th century that the influenza virus was identified and characterized. One of the earliest documented influenza pandemics occurred in 1580, known as the Russian flu. However, it was the devastating 1918 influenza pandemic, often referred to as the Spanish flu, that brought widespread attention to the impact and dangers of the virus. The Spanish flu infected an estimated one-third of the world's population and resulted in millions of deaths, making it one of the deadliest pandemics in history. Since then, influenza has continued to pose significant public health challenges. Over the years, various strains of the influenza virus have emerged and caused seasonal outbreaks, leading to significant morbidity and mortality, particularly among vulnerable populations such as the elderly, young children, and those with underlying health conditions. The study and understanding of influenza have greatly advanced over time. In the 1930s, researchers successfully isolated the influenza virus, enabling further investigation into its structure and behavior. This led to the development of vaccines to prevent influenza infections and antiviral medications to treat the illness. What is the history of the flu? Records show that the flu has existed for at least 1,500 years. The history of influenza begins with Hippocrates, 5th century BC, who first reported the spread of flu from northern Greece to the southern islands and elsewhere. When a flu epidemic hit Florence, Italy in the 1300s, they called it flu de freddo, the cold effect. No doubt what they thought was causing the illness. It wasn't discovered until 1892. History records flu epidemics, from flu epidemics that spread from Asia to Europe and Africa in 1580, to others that spread over the centuries to Europe and England. Known as the mother of all epidemics, the 1918 Spanish flu was the worst epidemic on record, affecting a third of the world's population and killing an estimated 50 million people. More American soldiers died from the flu than in the First World War. During the bird flu epidemic in China in 1997, humans were infected with the highly pathogenic A5N1 virus. From there, the disease spread to Europe and Africa, killing hundreds and killing many. According to the World Health Organization, illnesses in poultry affected livelihoods, economy, and international trade in the affected countries. Other avian influenza, A5, also caused infections in poultry and humans. 5. As most of us will remember, in 2009, a new virus called AL1N1 started spreading in North America and spread around the world, mostly affecting children and young adults, teenagers who are not newly immune. Many adults exposed to similar H1N1 viruses are protected by the vaccine, but it killed more than 200,000 people worldwide. What is the flu? Influenza or influenza is a respiratory illness transmitted by certain bacteria, not bacteria, that enter our nose, throat, and even our lungs. Depending on many factors, it can be mild like the flu or it can be fatal. The flu has killed 79,000 people a year in the United States alone since 2010, according to the CDC. The annual death toll worldwide could be as high as 646,000, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Frankly, the flu is a dangerous disease to watch out for, although most people catch it well. Unfortunately, not all viruses are created equal. They come in many forms, which complicates the research process, creating vaccines, and finding ways to prevent and stop their spread. Mother of all pandemics. The H1N1 flu, sometimes referred to as the mother of all pandemics, that swept the world from 1918 to 1919, affected influenza, particularly influenza A. The first wave of infections in early 1918 was mild, but the second wave later that same year was more deadly. The epidemic of 1918 is estimated to have infected 500 million people worldwide and killed between 250 million people. The incidence of death was so high that life expectancy worldwide fell by many years, and it was believed that more people died from the epidemic than on the entire planet. War. During the global epidemic, the United States and Europe raced to find an effective flu vaccine, and their efforts produced hundreds of thousands of doses of drugs, but they're targeting the wrong diseases. Advances in vaccines. In 1933, British scientist Wilson Smith C. H. Andrews and P.P. Laidlaw of the National Institute of Medical Research, NINR, in London, carried out the isolation and identification of the influenza virus. They found no bacteria in throat swabs from people with the flu, and found that the illness was caused by a virus. With the support of the U.S. Army, Thomas Francis and Jonas Salk of the University of Michigan developed the first flu vaccine. The vaccine was tested for safety and effectiveness in the U.S. military before being licensed for widespread use in 1945. Virus isolated in 1933. The scientists found other virus strains when tested, influenza B. In 1942, a new bivalent vaccine was developed to protect against both H1N1 influenza and influenza. Influenza B has just been discovered. During the flu season of 1947, researchers discovered that existing vaccines were ineffective against the flu virus circulating at the time. The World Health Organization, WHO, established the Global Influenza Center in 1948 and the Global Influenza Surveillance and Response System, GISRS, in 1952 to investigate the epidemic. Viruses to which the vaccine responds. Efforts to track the evolution and evolution of the flu continue today, as researchers track flu season and possible transmission. Because new viruses come out so frequently, the seasonal flu vaccine often changes each year as scientists determine how the virus changes and spreads. Each year, WHO recommends that flu vaccines be available in each hemisphere, with different vaccines designed for the 3 or 4 virus strains that should be common during flu season. How many types of flu are there? Scientists have now, interestingly, identified 4 different strains of flu, designated A, B, C, and D. Human flu is more viruses than A and B. These viruses cause seasonal flu every winter in the United States and around the world. Most flu vaccines protect against both strains. Influenza. Almost everyone has heard of bird flu and swine flu. Both are influenza type A, unlike type B. Type of viruses are given by dividing into subtypes according to the 2 small helpful parts of the bacterium's protein. Effect cells, hemagglutinin H and neuraminidase N. Bird subtypes AV5N1, AV7N9, and AV9N2. Swine flu subtypes are AV1N1, AV1N2, and A3N2. These influenza viruses can be transmitted by humans through contact with infected animals, birds, bird flu, and pigs, swine flu. It is not known that bird flu can easily spread from one person to another. Recently, the situation has changed with the swine flu. In the past, only people who came into direct contact with pigs could get swine flu. But now swine flu, contact components of swine flu, bird flu, and human flu that emerged in 2009 have caused it. Easy to spread. Person-to-person transmission through respiratory fluids. Influenza B. Influenza B is only found in humans and recently seals. Influenza A was previously thought to be more serious than influenza B because hospitalizations were higher with influenza A. However, a 2015 study of adults with influenza A and influenza B showed similar morbidity and mortality rates for the 2 types of influenza. Also, a Canadian study of children 16 years of age or younger found that influenza B had a higher mortality rate than influenza A3 influenza vaccine. There are 2 types of influenza A and 1 type of influenza B. Influenza C. The influenza C virus, which can affect pigs, usually causes mild symptoms, even more problems in children, the elderly, and people with other conditions below. Unlike A and B, type C is not thought to cause the flu. Most children have developed immunity to influenza C by age 10. Influenza D virus. Influenza D virus is not harmful to humans. What about pigs and cows? This is another story. Influenza D has a history dating back to 2002 and has existed for nearly a century or more, but was recently isolated in an infected pig in Oklahoma in 2011. Since then, it has been detected in cattle and pigs worldwide. 4. While there is no specific date to mark the start of the season, in the U.S. it usually runs from October to March, but can last through May depending on the number of patients. In short, most of the year can be flu season. In other words, it is a real disease that we need to be careful to protect ourselves and our loved ones from this insidious disease during the flu season. And we should be careful because it can lead to life and death. What do you think of our video? Let me know in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button. Also, subscribe to our channel before you go.